Hi, I'm Mark Schroeder, the head of client relations at GSHC Surrogacy Agency, and today we're speaking to Casey O'Connell, an attorney at the law offices of Falletta and Klein. Casey, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
What happens if a surrogate baby is born prematurely?
So it depends on where we are with the judgment that we discussed. So if the child is born before that judgment is entered, in addition to that limited power of attorney that I mentioned earlier, where the parents can nominate a caretaker for the child, we have some other documents that we implement for our clients to protect their parental rights and to protect the decision-making authority over the child. Because let's say, just for an example, the surrogate gives birth before we have the judgment from the court. The hospital will consider her to be the legal parent of that child because there's no judgment telling them otherwise. Now, most hospitals are familiar with surrogacy and they're not going to cause a lot of problems at the outset. But what we want to make sure is when a child's born prematurely, first and foremost, the health of the child is paramount. So we need someone there that the parents have comfort with to make decisions for the treatment of that child. So we have the surrogate sign a power of attorney nominating the parents to be the decision maker for the child because there's no legal judgment to say otherwise yet. And then the parents, whether they're here, they can make the decisions then under that power of attorney. If they're not here, then they can nominate an additional caretaker in that limited power of attorney that I mentioned before. So it's a chain of authority there granted through powers of attorney. And then we also go to court and request the entry of the judgment on an emergency basis because the child's born and decisions need to be made. And as the parties have expressed in their contracts, the intended parents are the parents of the child. We just need the court to recognize the urgency of that situation when the child's born prematurely.
How long can their surrogate baby stay in the hospital after delivery?
That's a great question. So if the parents aren't here and they have trouble getting here, which is a hassle right now given the travel restrictions, the hospital will care for the baby as long as the baby needs care. So until that baby is medically cleared to be discharged from the hospital, the baby will stay in the hospital. Now, when that baby is cleared to leave, that becomes a problematic situation because the hospital will then charge the parents significant sums of money to care for that child if it's been cleared to discharge and no one's there to take custody of the baby. So that's why we implement those powers of attorney to make sure a caretaker is present if the parents cannot be, to take custody of the child and avoid those expensive charges from the hospital. So I guess there's no set duration really. If the baby's in the NICU and needs to be in the NICU for months because of a very premature birth, then it could be months. Typically, if the baby's born healthy, it's 2 to 4 days before they're cleared for discharge. So that's why we also try and plan ahead before due dates, or if we hear any indication of early labor, to get a caretaker there and be present for that potential circumstance so we can avoid those costs. And also to make sure that the child is properly cared for.
So as an intended parent, how do I pay for the surrogate's medical expenses and then also the baby's medical expenses during the journey?
I'll start with the surrogate. So as part of the surrogacy contract and under California law, there has to be some provisions in the contract addressing how the parents will pay for the surrogate's healthcare. So they have some choices. They can pay directly out of pocket all the costs themselves. Most of the time people don't do that. They obtain an insurance policy for the surrogate and pay the premiums of the policy for the surrogate. They also pay any co-pays that are owed under that policy, any deductibles, and any uncovered medical expenses as well if those arise. So the parents are contractually obligated to pay those things for the surrogate. If there's complications that arise, the parents also pay those premiums for a set period of time after birth or termination of pregnancy to make sure that the surrogate's covered for a period of time there as well. With the children, the similar options for the parents. They can choose to pay directly out of pocket cash themselves to the hospital, or they can look into and obtain an insurance policy for the child. And that goes into effect once the child's born and would cover them for their costs while they're treated at the hospital. Again, the parents would owe co-pays, deductibles, and things owed under that policy. Alternatively, they can use the funds in their escrow account if there's enough funds there to pay. That's just a case-by-case determination on the source of the funds, really, but those are the options, is to cash pay or an insurance policy.
I'm Mark Schroeder, and this has been a conversation with Casey O'Connell from the law offices of Falletta and Klein. Casey, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Mark. Anytime. And if your clients ever have any questions, feel free to reach out. We're happy to help.